How do you use storytelling to transform your business? Our guest today is Bill Blankschaen. He is the founder and chief story architect at StoryBuilders. StoryBuilders tells stories that make the world a better place by creating compelling books and learning experience that turn ideas into greater impact, influence, and income. And he is a New York Times best-selling writer. Him and his team have worked with a variety of influencers like John C. Maxwell, Maxwell Leadership, Lewis Howes, Michael Hyatt, Jeff Allen, Stu McLaren, and so many others, entrepreneurs, business leaders, business coaches, political figures, cultural voices, and just like across the board. And so they have a huge amount of experience in telling stories that make a difference. And so today we're going to talk about the art of storytelling and how you can use it to transform your business, like I said, how to build your brand and how to improve your leadership qualities. So there's a lot that we're going to pack into this 30, 40-minute conversation. So I'm really excited to have him here. Bill, welcome to the Leaders Transformation.
Oh, Nicole, what a privilege to be here. What a wonderful introduction you had there. I noticed everybody you read off was all the guys that we've worked with. We have worked with a number of women also. I realized that I heard those names, but we love people and we love their stories. And that's why we do what we do. So glad to be here and looking forward to talking about it.
Well, you know what? I didn't even notice that until you said it, but yeah, I'm sure you do. Well, so before we start, I want to do a shout out to Greg Cagle because Greg is the one who introduced us. So he is just such an amazing human being. He was actually a guest in episode 444, and we were talking on the 4 dimensions of culture. It's funny how that worked out. And it's one of my favorite episodes. And so I just really enjoyed the conversation I had with Greg, and we have continued that conversation off and on. And he recommended you to be on the show and said, you are going to love this guy and what he has to share. So thank you, Greg, for making the introduction.
Yeah, thank you to Greg. I'll also put up another plug in for his book because it's a really good book, 4 Dimensions of Culture. Not only is he a great guy, but the book's a great book too. So I highly recommend people get it. Greg and I are just beginning to work on his 3rd book now as we're putting that together. So I'm looking forward to that too.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to it too. So let's talk about why it's important that we lead with a story.
Well, I mean, the history of humanity is story driven. From before we even had books or the materials to write books, we were telling stories, right? So much of history was passed down through oral traditions. It was the art of storytelling. That's how information was passed. That was the internet of thousands of years ago, right? But now, as it's evolved, the storytelling hasn't moved in its importance. And so people still resonate with stories. They want to hear stories. And so the person who tells the best story will get the most attention and move the most people for their cause. So as leaders, as business people, entrepreneurs, influencers, often it's easy for us to think about what I want to say instead of thinking, what does the listener, my audience, want to hear? How do they want to hear it? And if I can tell it in a story that leaves an impact and sticks with someone, because stories are sticky, right? If they tell it in a way that sticks with them, then they can actually take it from there and use it going forward.
So there's like an emotional connection, right? That happens, I guess, with stories, and we can relate to it. I always tell people, like clients that I've worked with who are wanting to get out and speak on stages and saying, look, you don't ever tell a story for your own benefit. You tell a story for the audience's benefit. Sure. How do you even know if your storytelling is actually effective? Because it might be emotionally connecting to you, but is it connecting to the audience? Is it connecting to the reader?
Sure. Well, it might be helpful to just walk through what we call our storytelling structure. Sure. Because storytelling is both an art and a science, just like writing a good book or curriculum design. Anything is both an art and a science. So let me walk through a little bit of the science. And I think you need to have these 5 boxes checked in any kind of storytelling. The first is attention. You have to get their attention, which really is about thinking through what does my audience want? Why are they here? What are they listening for? If it's in a workplace, in a speaking venue, thinking through what is it they really want? That's the attention part. And then the second part is the tension. Now, so attention and then tension. What is the problem? What's stopping them from getting what they want? What are the problems that they face? What are the top 3? Maybe go through that exercise. Once you know that, then it's about connection. That is demonstrating to your audience that you understand what they want and you feel their pain. First of all, you know what it's like, you've been there, done that, but also that you have the credentials, you have the experience to show them a solution, right? So that can all occur very quickly depending on the venue. It could be anything from a blog post to a keynote to a book. But then you get to the solution part, right? So attention, tension, connection, solution. That's really the heart of your message. If it's a keynote, this is the main point you're going to expand on and talk about and help people to apply. If it's a book, it might be, kind of the core. I'm just going to make this up, right? Because Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, right? That's the solution. Here's the 7 habits. Let me help you understand that. And then the final piece is action. And this goes to what you were saying here a minute ago. It's one thing to tell a story and a message in a way that people say, oh, I want that. And yes, I can feel that pain. But if you leave them there and don't take them to a better place, and you haven't really served them well, you've just created a soap opera for them, right? And so the action is really about, what do you want them to do with what you have shared with them? How can you actually apply this? What can you do with this? How can I motivate them to take the next step and actually put that into action? So I think that's kind of the science behind it. If you have those 5 elements, then you're in a really good place. You've covered your bases. You're not just leaving them in a that feels good, but what good does it do me sort of place.
So I find that a lot of like marketers were traditionally getting really diving deep into the fear-based marketing, and really that tension, what you're talking about, the problem, digging,
Sure.
digging. How
Sure.
do you know when it's like too much,
Yeah.
or not enough, right? Where you
Yeah.
think, well, I addressed the problem, and it's like,
Sure.
well, did they get, and did
Sure.
they feel that problem
Yeah.
viscerally, so that it
Yeah.
actually moves them to want to find a solution?
Yeah. Well, I think you got to remember, it's never about you
Yeah.
as the speaker or the leader or whatever. It's all about the other people. And the only way I have found to learn that is to try it, test it, practice it, get feedback, right? You get a feedback loop, right? So try it on a focus group or a test audience or a readers group or something like that, where you're open to it being edited. You're open to feedback. Yes, hey, this is a little bit too heavy. If you're getting feedback like that, all right, let me pull that back a little bit, because I agree, so much of marketing is fear driven, and the messaging around it, because it's effective in the short term. But if you're looking to build a brand, you're looking to build something that is sustainable and will last over time, it's kind of like if you're always in panic mode, that's just not sustainable. Your adrenal glands and so forth, your whole entire system won't be able to function over the long term. You have problems. Same thing with marketing to pain and fear all the time, right? Your audience just becomes so drained and exhausted, they don't want to hear from you anymore. Right. So yes, you have to talk about the very real fears and tensions they have, but also offer those solutions. So I would suggest testing, getting feedback. Like when we do a workshop or a training program or something, we always run it through a beta process first, get feedback, what worked, what didn't, make adjustments on that before we even move to finalize it, so that it can be used.
So yeah, and I love that balance, because it's like I don't know anyone who wants their brand associated with fear, where people actually, it's like there's a emotional connection to negative, right, towards their brand. And yet it happens a lot, I think. And
Sure.
people are getting tired of that. Now let's shift gears when we talk about writing books, even like titling books.
Mm-hmm.
I notice with titles, a lot of times they're very aspirational, but then there's some that stand out and they're jarring, or
Sure.
kind of curious,
Sure.
curiosity building and so forth. So
Sure.
kind of what's the secret to a good title?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to the first step in that process that I just shared a minute ago, attention, right? So you have to be thinking about, from a reader's standpoint, what is it that they want? And in most cases, you want a book title that aligns with what the reader is already thinking that they want. Now, they may not even realize that they're thinking that's what they want, right? But this is where a lot of work needs to be done on the front end, thinking through where they're coming from, what kind of words they use to talk about it, to actually create something that they want. And then you want it essentially to fill in that blank of, I want whatever, and for that title to really capture that powerfully. Now, there is room for really kind of out of the box titles, right? That the title itself is designed to really shatter the expectations and get attention. There is some room for that. However, you have to be careful that you're not out clevering your audience. That happens a lot. People come up with titles of books that are clever. They're too clever for their own good. The audience is like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to get from this book. I'm not sure what it's about. It seems really clever. There's a play on words there or something going on, but I don't know that I want to read it, right? And so that's part of, if we're talking main title of the book, I think that's something people have to give some attention to. What do they actually want? And then be willing to go through that process of trying on a lot of different ones, and hold it loosely. Um, you actually mentioned Lewis Howes. I work with him on creating a bunch of different books, and he's very good at having a knack, kind of an intuition of what might work for his audience for a book title. And yet even he holds it very loosely, and we talk back and forth with the team, and we try different things on, and so forth. We may eventually circle all the way back around and land where he wanted to go in the first place, maybe. The most recent project we didn't, another one we did. Right? So it depends, but just holding it loosely, getting feedback, hearing from the audience, and even doing surveys, right? When you get your top 3 or 4, put it out to your audience, get feedback on what resonates with you, what works for you, what would make you most likely to buy this kind of thing. And just hold it all very flexibly, right? Don't, as an author, don't fall in love with the title that it just has to be this title. At least not if your aim is for people to actually read it.
Yeah, good point. You may love it, but they won't. So
Right.
so when you talk about like Lewis Howes, I mean, there's just some big names, John C. Maxwell. These are some big names that you've worked with. What makes you different from all the other publishers out there, content designers? Like, 'cause there's a lot of them, right?
Sure.
And I know that you're familiar with a lot of them and how they work.
Sure. Yeah, I think, well, first of all, there are some people out there that I'm sure don't insist on quality, but there are a lot that do. And that's certainly true for us. We insist on excellence, but we also insist on a high level of creativity, right? We're not just trying to churn out words in that process. So we insist on really putting a lot of deep thought into being very creative about that. And that takes time to do. And so that's something that separates us to some extent. I think, frankly, one of the things that really separates us, and this is, I actually, Greg Cagle and I have had this conversation about us before, and he's confirmed this, is that 2 things, I think. One, our authenticity, that we insist on that level of authenticity where we're going to get real with people and with their content. And I think a lot of influential people have a hard time finding people who are willing to be authentic with them. Right? They get a lot of people trying to impress them or those kind of things, and all from the very beginning, we've just taken it as, hey, it doesn't matter what your name is, you're a person, and we're coming alongside you to help you. We're here to serve you, and in a genuine way and with integrity, right? So that, I think, is authenticity is one thing that separates us. The other one is our commitment to relationships, right? Again, people first. And so when we're working with somebody, we don't see them. In fact, we don't even use the word customer or client at StoryBuilders. Even as I just said that, it felt grating to me. We use story partner, right? We don't even talk about them as customers or clients. They're our partners, right? And we think of them in that way. And so often we build friendships with the people we work with, to the point that when we're done with a project or something, they're all like, how can we work together again? Can we stay in touch? Can we do that? And that often leads to referring us to many other people, right? So I think the creativity, the excellence, all that, absolutely, those are table stakes. But then we take it to another level with our commitment to authenticity and these deep, meaningful relationships that I think allow so many other things to take place. They allow the ideas to really blossom and go into places that we never even thought they could before.
Yeah, I love that point about the authenticity, because I think people are afraid to, and this happens in coaching. I mean, in a way, you're coaching,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Where there's some people say, I want you to be honest with me, but then they don't, right?
Yeah,
Or coaches
sure.
are saying, oh, like, I'll be honest with you and I'll tell you the truth, but they don't, because
Sure.
they're afraid that they might get fired,
Sure.
and so the principle of high need, low power kicks in, and
Sure.
they're afraid to
Sure.
say what is true, and or they're just in awe, right? I mean, just in awe. I mean, look, with John C. Maxwell has written
Sure.
so many books.
Right.
I
Right.
think he knows something about writing books,
Right.
and
Right.
yet to be honest with him and say, no,
Right.
John, I don't think that is
Right.
actually the right way to put it, or the message, or whatever. We need to fine tune it.
Sure.
With
Sure.
somebody like that, it's, it takes a bit of courage. So I'll
Sure.
insert there also, like, that courage to be authentic
Yeah.
is really,
Yeah.
really important. So
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
good.
absolutely. And for instance, one of the people we've worked with over the years is Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. And he gets hit up all the time with people wanting a piece of his time or his money or input, all that kind of stuff. And it was just, I think it was refreshing for him, is what he's kind of shared with us, to work with us, that he didn't feel like we wanted something from him, right? We were literally coming along beside him. How can we support you, help you, serve you? And just staying in touch, and building that relationship that continues beyond whatever the projects might be that we're working on at that time. So it's that kind of high trust relationship that is our primary objective.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, when you said not wanting anything from them, I think about like Kevin Harrington or anybody. It's like,
Sure.
where it's like, hey, I want your referrals, or hey, yes, we'll work with you, but we want whatever, connections and influence. Yeah, that's a good point. I had another guest on this show that was talking about this, working with, I know who it was Steve Schenbaum. He has a company called Game On Nation, and they do like facilitating of interactive improv training programs around communication. And he'll work with celebrities and like personally, they'll do their big programs and so forth, even with big teams and so forth. But when they're working individually, he says, I never use that on social media, because there's like that respect of the relationship, not trying to use that as leverage. Hey, I work with so-and-so today. I'm just so excited to work with so-and-so today. And I think that's so important. So it's good.
Yeah.
And you know what? Maybe there's a lesson in there. I wasn't planning for us to talk about that, but maybe there's a lesson there for someone listening that's like, hey, you know what? You want to work with the influencers, the top dog. Okay, well, there's something that goes with that trust level that's required in that. So it's good.
And I would agree with that. I've seen that certainly true. I know I've tried to be very respectful of our story partners, and not, we like to talk about it as not crossing the beams, as a reference to Ghostbusters back in the day, right? Don't cross the beams. Because we have different idea beams going on, right? We work with this person, they have this idea, and this person, these ideas. And we still have to be careful to protect that IP, that intellectual property, and just be protective of their time and their access. I've often had people come to me and say, hey, can you introduce me to so-and-so? And I'm like, if it makes sense for so-and-so, and it's a win for them, then I can make the ask. And I've done it in some instances where I thought it was actually a mutual win. But I try to be very protective about that, and their access to that. And I think they appreciate it. So,
yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about identifying the core theme in a brand. So we've got your structure, right?
Right.
I know this for myself, right? We have a story and we want to put that into, a whole message and platform. Sure. And there's a lot of themes that run through people's life, right? And so how do you figure out what is the core theme for somebody to run with?
Yeah.
When maybe they could talk about 5 different things with excellence, or 10 or whatever. I mean, like all these guys, right? That, ladies, I'm sure too, the ladies, you've worked with all these people, and I mean, they can talk about a lot of things, but it's like, what do they want to get known for? How do you figure what that is?
Great question. I think there's two parts. One's a realization and one's what you actually do. The realization is that the person who wants to get known for everything will be known for nothing. right? So again, it's the classic, you have to niche down and focus in an area and develop your expertise in that area, then you can expand to elsewhere. And you can cite thousands of examples, the famous ones like Oprah Winfrey and all, these kind of names. I'm thinking of one of the comedians, well, maybe not, even like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, right? Hey, I'm going to get known in the wrestling world, and that's going to be my entry point. And from there, I'm going to expand to that, But if you try to be all things to all people, you just won't be anything to anybody. And so being willing to kind of rank those things. And so that's why the practical advice I would give. So when we do what we call brand story, when we develop that message for an individual or organization, we walk through that 5-step storytelling structure that I just shared a minute ago, but we add 2 components to the front of it. The first is reflection, and that is about who are you? Because we believe that it starts with who. Before you get to why, you have to start with who, right? So if Jobs and Wozniak back in the day of Apple had decided, hey, we need a why, I don't know, computers, does that sound like a good enough why? Does that it naturally, organically grew out of who they were, right? And they were true to who they were, and out of that came their why. So we start with who. So we do like an in-depth process, really pulling from people. Who are you? Right? What are you passionate about? What do you care about? And almost there's almost a therapy element that goes into that of helping people to unpack that at their core. Who are they? But then secondly, it's not enough to just know who you are. It's you have to know your audience, right? So you have to reflect on who you are, but then you have to go deeper and investigate who the audience is, right? So that's what you're looking for. There is the opportunity to really understand your audience. And even there, I think there's a 3-step process with there. Like, who's your core audience? Who are the people you're really trying to reach? Then who's your secondary audience? Those are kind of the next step out. And then the broader audience. I spoke to someone, we're working on developing a book with a former US congressman right now. And one of his first things he said was, this book is for everybody. And he went down the list. I'm like, well, no, we're going to have to focus it in at the core. Who's actually going to buy this book? Who are the decision makers? And so we figured out who that is. And yes, it could be good for those people. And yes, it could be good for those people, but it's really got to resonate there, because if it resonates there, it can resonate out from there, right? But it's got to go there first. So I think adding those 2 components to the front end of a brand message, asking who am I and who's my audience, right? Getting that sense of where do those 2 intersect, and then running through that process and being willing to recognize, yeah, there are 5 or 6 different themes I could approach, but this one really resonates with what the audience needs. I'm really passionate about it, and it's my entry point. Maybe not a lot of other people are talking about that in that way right now, and so it'll make me unique, and unique is a good thing.
Yeah, I love that, because I think the fear is, and I know that for myself, it's like, well, if I go too focused in my audience and niche down, that I'm going to exclude all these other people.
Sure.
And that's not actually the way it works, but that's
right.
Human nature. It's like, oh, well, why would I cut my market into a fraction? Right.
And there's grounds for that fear. I mean, we went through this ourselves probably, I don't know, 5 years ago or so. We went through that kind of scope creep, if you will, as an organization. Because we wanted to help people. And so we came across so many times where they say, well, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And can you help me with that? And we're like, sure, we can. Let's help you. And so we spread broader and broader and broader and thinner and thinner and thinner. And we ultimately realized that is not a sustainable model. We're doing things we don't really want to do. Yes, we're sort of helping them, but we're not even helping people as well as we'd like to. And so we made the decision to cut back, focus on being storytellers. That's who we are. We tell stories that make the world a better place, compelling books, engaging learning experiences. That's what we do. And overnight, by the way, we walked away from almost half of our revenue, like overnight, to make that move.
Wow.
And success didn't happen the next week, right? It was several months before we could pull out of that. But that's one of the best moves we ever made, was really focusing in on what we do. Because what it allows people to do is to know who you are, right? So, Nicole, if you're having a conversation with somebody and somebody says, oh, I'm thinking about writing a book. Oh, I know the storytelling people, right? I know who those people are. I have a box I can put you in and connect you to somebody, right? So otherwise, it becomes this, well, they do a little bit of everything. And therefore, I really can't refer you because I don't really know how they can help you, because they're not really known for anything. So find something you want to become known for, and then go deep on it. It has to be something that resonates with you, right? That you're passionate about. There's a need in the world to help meet. But when you put those together, I think it's really something powerful.
Yeah, you got to be passionate about it. Otherwise, you're not going to want to talk about it all the time.
Right,
So
right.
I know that for
right.
myself. It's like,
Yeah,
do I really want to talk about this that much?
yeah, yeah.
And I think we're talking about business growth.
Mm,
A big conversation, like when you're talking about that, is like the lifetime value of a client and how do you keep them coming back. And I think that can, just even listening to you, I think
sure.
that can trip us up because we're trying
Mm,
to hold on to them. That's where the scope,
sure,
whatever you called it, scope
sure,
leak, it's
sure.
like we're trying to hold on to them forever.
Right, right,
And
right,
and versus saying nope, and now it's time, you need to
right,
move on
right.
and work with somebody else who's going to
Yeah.
take you to the next stage.
And we work with people on both sides of that. We work with a lot of people who are one and done. They have one project. That's really what they want to do. We work with them. I'm thinking of a gentleman who was head of HR at FedEx, and he was at Tesla. Now he's at Comcast. We did one book with him, but he's also referred lots of people to us over the years as well, right? We haven't worked on another book, or we're beginning to talk about it, possibilities. So sometimes it's a work with somebody, then years later work with them again. Other people, like Greg Cagle is a great example. We've done multiple books, multiple workshops, multiple trainings. We're doing a digital course experience with him now, right? And that's been pretty consistently what we're walking with him and many others with that same kind of format. So it really depends. I think it's like any good relationship. You have to be willing to let it go if that's what's best for the person, right? And if they want to continue, great. If we can legitimately find a way to put our strengths to work with somebody, we want to do that, but we don't want to try to force it.
Yeah. So let's talk about, as we wrap up here, the extent of your scope, right?
Sure.
So you mentioned about book writing and
Sure.
publishing, and you mentioned about learning experiences, digital learning experiences, workshops, and so forth. Where does that scope end? So if somebody's listening and they say, oh, that's what I'm looking for, I need
Yeah.
that particular
Right.
piece right now.
Well, we like to think about it as I said, IP, intellectual property, right? Turn your ideas into impact, influence, and income. And it's often the core of that is a book. It helps to crystallize that IP, give you something really branded that you can put out in the world. And so we do everything book related, from idea to publication. We work with other publishers to create books for them. We all of it, anything in that space we can do, and do it all day, every day. But on the other side, the next step of that is, how do I monetize that? And that could be in a digital course, and we do A to Z in a digital course, or whatever's needed there to bring that to life, from video to scripting to tech production, all that. But then also trainings and workshops, like we've done John Maxwell's last almost 9, 10 years. I'm not sure, 8 to 9 years of all their content creation, that trainings and workshops they sell in Maxwell Leadership. So we do a lot of those types of things, actually creating in-person experiences, learning experiences, but also different programs. Like, hey, I want to develop a coaching program, or those kind of ways that they can monetize that is what we do. So that leads up to there. On the other side of that is something we mentioned earlier about getting clear on your brand story. And I think I would put that's almost in the book messaging category, but kind of a first step often is people need to get clear on that brand story. And so that's often something we work with as kind of a first step to help people get clarity on their direction. And out of that, often then comes, I need a book, or I need IP development or something like that, now that they have clarity. Because I've seen it again and again. We're working with a couple of gentlemen right now who have a wonderful training and assessment product, but they're so all over the place and so scattered that it's very difficult to communicate what it is and the value of it. And so they're just hitting friction. So we've started to work with them even right now. Let's clarify that, simplify it. How do you message that? And I mean, I know personally, and I'm sure you felt this too, that when you feel like you're just so busy doing things that you can't slow down enough to really get clear on what that message is. And if the message isn't clear, there's friction. People aren't going to buy because they won't even know what you're selling, right? They won't know how, they won't be able to be helped by you because they won't understand the value of what you're offering. So that if I could put parameters on who we are and what we do, it would be those things right there. Does that clarify that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that that really helps because otherwise it seems conceptual, right? In terms of like,
Sure,
okay, what do you do for Lewis Howes?
sure.
We saw that example, but where are the boundaries of it, if you will?
Right, right. Yeah. And
You
for Lewis, by the way, we've done a little bit of all of that we just talked about over the course of time. We've done different bits and pieces.
Yeah, yeah. So what's your favorite story? When you talk about a business
Hmm.
turnaround story, maybe somebody that you work with and they were kind of stuck in the I got to talk to everybody and maybe turning that
Hmm.
around into something that was really precise and
Yeah,
impactful. I mean, we
yeah.
are talking about storytelling, so
Right, right.
tell us a
Yeah,
story, Bill.
yeah, absolutely. Boy, there's so many. I'm gonna I'm going to go to this was a really fun one. Actually, I'll tell you a couple if that's all right, really quick.
Go for it.
One of them that really sticks with me is about a young lady who wanted to write a book because her twin sister, she had a twin sister, and she had a history of heart defects. She was born with heart defects. She'd had four open heart surgeries by the time we met her. She's now had a fifth. Uh, but her sister passed away unexpectedly, middle age, just passed away unexpectedly. Ironically, she was the one who wasn't supposed to survive childhood, and yet her sister died before her. And so she wanted to write a memoir that was really powerful and emotionally driven. Um, and I mention this because she's not a big name. She doesn't have a big platform. She had something burning in her heart that she wanted to express and get out to the world for family, for friends, for others who could be helped by it. And it was just a delightful project working with her, creating that, telling that story in that way, um, that created that. So I say that because you don't have to be a big name to create a really incredible book that makes an impact in the world. On the other side of that, another young lady we worked with, she had just started a company with her husband called Lady Boss. She was a female bodybuilder, award-winning bodybuilder. And we worked with her to create a book that really served as the tip of the arrow of their lead generation funnel. They did this book, free plus shipping book, and all these kind of offers and so forth. They used that book to do that over the course of like 7 years. They built that business to over 200 million in annual revenue from these two younger people like willing to put in the work, and they did it and they built it, and then sold that company, exited that company, and now they're moving on to other things in real estate and things like that. And they're just a wonderful family, and just they're a blessing to know and a blessing to everybody around them. And it all started, I got to know them in the early days when we were working on that first book to bring it to life, and now they built an empire, sold the company to Russell Brunson, I believe, and exited. So I could go on. There's all kinds of fun stories like that, but telling your story and using your story can be that leverage that can make all the difference. Telling it well and getting it out into the world, it sets you apart as unique. And as I said, unique is something that people really want because they resonate with it.
Oh, I love that. I love the contrast too, because yeah, a lot of times we think that our story has to be this huge thing that for it to be impactful,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everybody has a
Yeah.
story.
Well,
So
and that's what I
yeah,
think we have to remember is that every story is a huge thing.
it is a
Yeah.
huge
That's
thing.
why
Yeah,
we believe every story
yeah,
matters. That's why we do what we do, right? And so whether it's with the Lewis Howes, John Maxwell, people you've never heard of, everywhere in between, every story
yeah,
matters. It isn't one is more important than the other. It all matters, and that's why we do it.
yeah. Well, it's so easy. Like I know this from, and you and I've talked about this. I, wrote 25,000 words for my book, and then I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know, does anybody want to read this?
Mm-hmm.
Or is this just for me? And I think it's very easy for us to say, oh, there's so many bigger stories out there, more
Right, right.
quote unquote important stories
Yeah,
out there. And
yeah,
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 everybody's
yeah.
got a story.
Well,
So yeah,
we know our story, so our story feels normal. It feels
true.
mundane. Doesn't feel valuable to us because
Yeah.
we know it, right? It's same thing with our strengths, right? Our strengths don't feel that unique because they feel normal to us. But the reality is, there are a lot of people out there who are thinking the same thing. And when they see, oh, you have the same story I have. Oh, we have a connection that's encouraging me, that's inspiring to me. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to learn from you. and it opens up that world to that place where there are certain people in the world who are going to resonate with your story that aren't going to resonate with Lewis or John, these other names, right? They're just not, it's not going to happen, but they will resonate with you, right? If you have the courage to put that story out there.
Yeah. Bill, this was so good. I knew it was going to be good, and it was. And thank you. We covered the spectrum in terms of what we talked about. And yeah, I'm just going to encourage people to go to mystorybuilders.com, your website, to learn more. And we'll make sure the links to your LinkedIn and your social media will all be in the show notes. Yeah. Any final thoughts? Maybe like a first step that people take?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing I would do, I would actually invite them, if they want to talk to one of our senior story strategists, they can go to a specific link, which would be mystorybuilders.com/story, and just schedule time to talk. There's no obligation. Let's just strategize. Talk to one of our strategists and talk through your ideas. If that's what you want, we're happy to do that. So that's mystorybuilders.com/story. But I would leave people with this final thought, though. It's your story matters, right? And so as you're building a business, or you're marketing, or you're communicating, you're building a speaker platform, whatever it is you're doing out there, don't underestimate your story, right? Because your story is unique to you. You're the only person who has that blend of experience and mistakes and failures and successes and wins and, all of those things. You're the only one who has that unique take. The wisdom literature says there's nothing new under the sun, right? But there is your take on that on what's under the sun, right? No one else has your experience exactly with that. So people have similar, and so they can connect with that. So just don't undervalue your story as you move that forward, and get clear on the story to really remove the friction for you to share your message with the world.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for being here and spending a few minutes with us today. It's been awesome. Yeah.
My pleasure.
I always say leaders of transformation take action. So for our listeners and our viewers that are out there, just the fact that you're here with us throughout the whole interview and having a conversation, I say interview, conversation. Sure. And, I encourage you to take action on something. Maybe it's starting with that question of, who am I? And what a simple yet profound question of, like, who am I? What am I passionate about? And who is the audience that I really want to reach? Maybe it's going to that link and booking a time and talking through some strategy and ideas with Bill's team. I encourage you to do that. Take advantage of this, because as we've been talking about, everybody has a story to tell. And if you feel that burning desire to get that story out there, maybe that's your confirmation that you need to tell that story. And somebody needs to hear it. And especially right now, where we have a lot of people that are experiencing depression and anxiety and disconnect and feeling the futility of all the things that's going on in the world, to have that inspiring story that maybe yours is unique and it's going to touch them because it's going to be exactly what they're going through. You can make all the difference in the world. And even if it's for one person, it's not going to be just for one person, but even if it is for just one person, then you made a difference and it was worth it. So I encourage you to do that. We'd love to hear your stories. You can go on leadersoftransformation.com. You can reach out to us. Of course, you can follow us on social as well. And we'd love to hear how this has impacted you and your story. And although we're not able to have everyone as a guest on this show, we celebrate you, and we want to acknowledge what you're up to and support that. So if there's any way we can do that, let us know. And again, Bill, thank you for being here, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. And we look forward to seeing you next week on another episode of the Leaders of Transformation.